Hello everybody, Danny Music Man here and welcome back to the channel. I hope all of you are having a fantastic day, fantastic week, fantastic month, even a fantastic year. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just a more chilled, relaxed video. I just want to talk about some of the albums, in fact 3 albums, that I've had the most anticipation and excitement for throughout my life so far. And there's 3 of them that I can comfortably say belong on that podium. Those albums include 2022's The Tipping Point by Tears for Fears. The other one is 2024's Moon Music by Coldplay. And 2024's The Cure's Finally, Songs of a Lost World. Okay, I know you're thinking, wait a minute, that's not Songs of a Lost World. It's right there. It's right there. But I don't have the CD yet, so I'm just using this as a reference. So just pretend that this is the, the stone statue face thing that you see on the cover right there. So I'm just using this as reference. But 2024's Songs of a Lost World by The Cure. So the first album that I want to talk about is the first one to be released as far as chronologically, these 3 albums. This was the first one. February 2022 was The Tipping Point by Tears for Fears was finally released. And each one of these albums kind of represents a era in my life, meaning what band I was most into. Because usually the way I listen to music is I'll always have like one band that I'm fixated on, and then as that band, kind of lives its life in my brain, another one comes along and the cycle repeats. So in 2022, actually I would say from 2020 to 2022, I was big time into Tears for Fears. And you'll see that a lot of these bands, I was really in a phase. But for this one, Tears for Fears, I remember, getting into Tears for Fears when I was a little kid because I had heard Everybody Loves a Happy Ending, which is my favorite album of all time. And I was, I kind of had this acute awareness of them, even though at the time, I was young and I didn't really understand. I just kind of listened to music and then in through one ear, out through the other, that kind of thing. So then it wasn't till my teenage years where I finally listened to Tears for Fears like entirely, and not just the big songs and Everybody Loves a Happy Ending, but their whole discography. And that includes, Raúl and the Kings of Spain, Elemental, Seeds of Love, those albums. And I got really into them because, Tears for Fears is one of the best bands of the 80s. If you don't believe me, go listen to their music because it's unreal. 7.5 albums now if you include Songs for a Nervous Planet with the 4 to 5 songs. But Tipping Point was this album that was rumored to come out in 2017. And I didn't know this at the time, but in 2017 they were supposed to release a new album, but they shut that project down because they looked at it and they realized, you know what, maybe this album is not truly representative of us because it sounds way too modern and it doesn't have soul, to quote Roland Orzabal loosely. That's what he said about the first iteration of the Tipping Point album. So they kind of canned it, and for a while there was this mystery about when's the next Tears for Fears album coming, and we heard little things every now and then, but nothing really concrete until finally, the report started to come in that Tears for Fears would play their new song on the radio. I think this was like October 2021 when the lead single, the title track, The Tipping Point, came out. And I remember it was the most exciting thing because it was like finally, after 2 years, I know I'm young, and I know 2 years may not seem like a long time, but for me, it felt like forever for Tears for Fears news. But finally, we had something, it felt like the, snowball was rolling. It was starting to snowball. It was about to gain momentum, and the new song came out, and it was pretty good. I remember not really digging it at first, but then as time went on, I was like, all right, you know what? This is a pretty solid song. So it was like pretty good. But eventually, the hype for this album grew and grew until finally February 2022 rolled around, and this finally released. And I remember listening to it, and my first reaction was like, it's fine. And I'm looking back now, I was like, how can you say that? But maybe sometimes music, I'm sure a lot of the audience knows that it takes time to maybe, process an album or a song, and your true feelings about a work of art, essentially, don't get realized until like maybe weeks or months or years after you listen to it and you have a change of heart and you change your opinion on it. But I remember the second or third time listening to this album, I was like, all right, this is pretty good. And I would say this was very well worth the wait. I think that this thing is very strong. Songs like Rivers of Mercy is just gorgeous. I mean, it's like Blood of Eden, Peter Gabriel, plus Woman in Chains by Tears for Fears. My Demons is just an absolute barn burner. Sounds like Depeche Mode. Please Be Happy. I wish it was the Roland Orzabal version, because if it fits more him singing it, because it's about his wife's death. And I think that song's great, but I don't really like the album version because it's like in a higher key and it's Kurt Smith singing it. Nothing against Kurt Smith, but I just prefer Roland's, like, you know, his vocals on that song. And Master Plan is just fantastic. It sounds like Everybody Loves a Happy Ending style, very Beatlesy sounding song. So I highly recommend this album. If you haven't heard this, this is even for like reunion, so to speak. This wasn't really a reunion because Tears for Fears were still playing, but if you want like a really good example of a band reuniting and actually making a good album, unlike, you know, it can sometimes be that bands reunite and they don't make a really great album, so it's kind of like, but this is a really good example of when things go right. So this is very good. I highly recommend this. The next album is Moon Music by Coldplay, and this is kind of an interesting one because I had first heard Paradise in like 2012, and I remember listening to it on the radio in like my mom's car, and I just remember, you know, again, I was young, I didn't really process whether a song was good or not. I just heard it and moved on with my life. And I'd always had this acute awareness of Coldplay, and I knew that I kind of liked them because I've heard Viva La Vida, heard Paradise, Adventure of a Lifetime, and I was like, you know what, those are good songs. And as my life went on, and I listened to those songs. But in 2021, they released Music of the Spheres, which don't even get me started on that hunk of junk. However, the second promotional single, Coloratura, I remember listening to it, and I was like, whoa, this is really good. And I remember thinking to myself, dude, have I been missing out on Coldplay this entire time? So in 2021, that's when I really started to get into Coldplay. And I listened to their discography and I realized, wow, they are pretty good. Even, you know, Milo Xyloto is actually their best, now looking back, their best pop album. And I remember thinking to myself that, you know what, I'm kind of excited for what they're going to do next. And I remember I was in denial when Music of the Spheres came out because I was like, all right, it's like a B, you know, it's all right. But every listen, and then comparing it to the older stuff, even stuff from like Ghost Stories, I was like, this stinks. So as time went on, you know, I was always like, all right, you know what, Music of the Spheres was pretty bad. I'm excited to see what they're going to do next, because they mentioned that there was this promise by Chris Martin that they were going to do, like, you know, they were going to stop in 2025 making albums, and that it was going to be supposed to be like an album a year until the last album, which is self-titled, called Coldplay, which is 2025, and, you know, or it's almost 2025, and that promise is not true because Music of the Spheres only came out this year, and 2025 is next year, so they need some more time. I think, you know, COVID probably threw a wrench in that, but I remember getting excited for this, and it felt like this took way longer of a wait than, for example, Tipping Point, because 2021, we had the mindset that the next year we were going to start getting teasers for the next one, but that never happened, and so 2023 rolled around, and we got little snippets of songs in live concerts, and it was like, you know, water dripping from a faucet, just like, right, you know, this looked a little bit weird, sorry, but 2023 came around, no new songs, and then midway through 2024, everyone was like, really, are we not gonna get anything this year either? How long is this album gonna take? And then in June, finally, Feels Like I'm Falling in Love got released, and it was like, oh, it was like a catharsis, like, thank you so much. And that song came out, and it was alright. Looking back now, I remember being like, it's okay, but now I think it's fine. It's a fine, unassuming, you know, song. It's fine. And I was like, alright, you know what? Here we go again. Snowball's rolling, the momentum's picking up. And then finally they released this album in October. And I remember listening to it, and it's pretty good, guys. It's pretty good. I would say it's tied for Milo Xyloto, maybe a little bit under, but this is very good. This is night and day from, Head Full of Dreams and Music of the Spheres 1. And I think this is this is like if you took Ghost Stories, Milo Xyloto, and Music of the Spheres 1 and made it into an album and combined all three of those. Some standout tracks is the title track, Moon Music. It's absolutely fantastic. Good Feelings is actually not terrible. It's on the higher end of the really poppy sounding Coldplay songs. Not Rainbow Emoji, sorry. Alien Hits, Alien Radio is pretty awesome. I'm a Mountain is fantastic. Eterna is actually pretty fun to listen to. And All My Love, even though All My Love is super duper cheesy with the, Be My 1, 2, 3 Forever. Ugh. And yeah, it's just pretty good. This is definitely a step in the right direction. You can't deny that. Even if you don't like Moon Music, you can't deny that this is a far more organic, and it sounds like they're actually a band sometimes. So Moon Music is number 2 for me. Pretty good. And finally, my number 3 is 2024's The Cure, Songs of a Lost World. Y'all, this is the one that took the longest to wait for, because it all started when I was a very little kid with my iPhone 3G, and I listened to Pictures of You, Just Like Heaven, and maybe A Letter to Elise, possibly, I think. And I remember those 3 songs were absolutely magical. I know I've been talking like, when I listened to songs as a kid, it doesn't really resonate, but I remember those songs did resonate, and I loved the album covers, especially the greatest hits with Robert Smith and his like starry hands. Absolutely fantastic. One of my favorite covers of all time. And so there was always this like, I really like The Cure. They're good. And as I grew older and I started to familiarize myself with The Cure's discography, they're probably one of my favorite bands of all time because of how dark and atmospheric and kind of foreboding and goth they are at times. And I know a lot of people, they like to, make The Cure into 2 camps, the really light, poppy, airy Cure and the dark atmospheric Cure. I'm totally a dark atmospheric Cure kind of guy. I mean, good lord, this album right here is like, I know a lot of people think this is raw, and it's raw, but it's kind of interesting to listen to, even if you think that the production sucks, which it kind of does. Like, why would you get a metal producer to produce a Cure album? But I actually like this album. But I remember there was always this thing, I'm sure a lot of you Cure heads know that Robert Smith was always saying, oh yeah, this album's going to come out in 2019. And then he said that in 2020, and 2021, and 2022, and it's like, dude, when is the next album going to come out? Because the last album was 2008's 413 Dream, which was okay. I really like Underneath the Stars. That song's fantastic. But it was like, okay, come on, 2008, y'all. Where is this new album? And then finally this year they started teasing this, and it was like, oh my god, until I see the actual album in my hands, I don't believe it, despite what all the teasers show. And this album finally came out. I pre-ordered this, and it's just super exciting. I remember listening to it, and wow, this thing is dark. It is very dark. There's some great Simon Gallup bass parts with the super punchy, crunchy bass, and Robert Smith's vocals sound fantastic. There's some great moments that harken back to even some of the earliest Cure albums, like Pornography and Faith and all those albums. And this album is very close to this. It's like if Disintegration and The Cure's self-titled 2004 were like blended together, because there's some moments here that sound like it could have been taken from Disintegration. And there's some moments here that's like really heavy and in your face, like on the song War Song and Drone No Drone with the really beefy bass. It sounds like the early mid 2000s Cure. And yeah, this album's fantastic. Alone was a really great lead-off single. I did not listen to A Fragile Thing when it released because there's only 8 songs on this album, and I was like, you know what? I won't listen to the second single, A Fragile Thing. I'll just wait for the rest of the album so I don't hear any other songs and I can keep it fresh. And yeah, pretty good stuff. I mean, there's not a bad song. And by the way, End's song is absolutely amazing. I love that the vocals don't come in till like 6 minutes and the song's like 10 minutes long. I love that. It's fantastic. So this album's great. If you're sad or just, you know, if you just like sad songs and it being, you know, atmospheric, being in a dark room, this album's perfect. I love this album. It's really good. So anyways, guys, that's just a quick little, well, not quick at all. This is a long video. But those are just my 3 most anticipated albums of all time so far. We'll see if that changes in the future. But yeah, I just want to talk about that. And let me know what you guys think is your, what in your opinion, what are your most anticipated albums of all time? Was there an album that you were looking forward to so much and it maybe lived up to expectations, or it didn't? Let me know. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.